Folks, when you're a YouTuber, there's a lot of dumb decisions you can make. You can take a bad sponsorship deal. You can start beef with another creator that you really shouldn't have. You can put out a farewell message that's emotionally manipulative only to reveal that you were actually just taking all of your previously free content and now locking it behind a paid subscription service with no understanding of how that would impact your audience. You know, the kind of thing that any of us could fall for. But I don't think any of those are quite as dumb as what I'm going to do here today. Hey everyone, it's me, Aaron, Thorgy, that guy who before making this video was not dead inside, you know me. On this channel, we have a show called the Fighting Game Retrospective. And for anybody who is unaware of it, it's where we go back through and look at every single installment in a fighting game series. We cover the development, we cover the gameplay, we cover the characters, and yes, occasionally we even cover the story. And over the last year, we have had our biggest retrospective ever, in which we have been going back through and covering the entire history of the massively successful Street Fighter series. And on the last episode, we tackled Street Fighter V, arguably the most controversial Street Fighter. And that became the very first Street Fighter to include its own full-length playable story mode. A huge undertaking for this series, something that we had never seen before from this franchise. And it was also the worst fighting game story mode I have ever played. It was so bad that when I was writing out the retrospective for Street Fighter V, and it came time to talk about that story mode, I started typing out all my thoughts on it, and I kept typing, and kept typing, and I just kept going and going until I had created a bloated mess that was almost as bad as the actual story mode itself. So there was no way that I could put that in the actual retrospective. However, I knew that people would still want to hear my thoughts on Street Fighter V story mode. Despite the fact that it's like 7 years old at this point, but hey, everybody enjoys seeing someone talk about hot garbage. So the compromise was that I would leave out my thoughts on the story mode in the retrospective and we would save it for this special one-shot episode that you're watching today. So yes, today we're going to be covering all my thoughts on Street Fighter V, A Shadow Falls. But before we get to that, a little backstory for anybody who didn't see that retrospective. For anyone who didn't catch our episode on the making of Street Fighter V, this game was the follow-up to the colossal hit that was Street Fighter IV, which revived Capcom's fighting games and had them leading the industry once again. Then Keiji Inafune traded the entire company for some magic beans, which didn't pan out. Capcom was losing tons of money, and Street Fighter V needed to come out and impress the whole world. Unfortunately, because most people who knew what they were doing left between the last game and this one, and because they spent 2 years worth of time and money on an early build that they ended up throwing out, Street Fighter V was not shaping up too well. Then the game came out and it was one of the most barren fighting games in recent history. A severely reduced cast of characters, no trials, no versus CPU option, and no arcade mode. People complained loudly about this lack of content, but Capcom kept telling us, don't worry, we know there wasn't anything in the game at launch, but that's because we were putting all of our time and energy into the story mode, which also wasn't in the game at launch, but that's right around the corner. And when it gets here, all these delays will have been worth it. Everything will be fixed when the story gets here. And then the story finally arrived. And based on how I opened up this video, you all know how I feel about this story mode. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Street Fighter V, A Shadow Falls. The story begins with Charlie Nash in some kind of a dreamlike state with a random sheep that tells him to devour, because I guess someone on this staff saw a Lars von Trier film and now they think they understand symbolism. The sheep then transforms into Necalli, who wants to devour Charlie's soul, setting up the two big players of this storyline. I'm just kidding, this is the last time they'll ever interact. Charlie then wakes up in a coffin and a mysterious woman named Colleen tells him that she and her organization revived him after Bison killed him, and she's going to help him get his revenge. We then cut to India, where Ryu is seeking out Dhalsim, searching for help with the Satsui no Hado that he can feel slowly overtaking him. But they're interrupted by Necalli, a monstrous ancient warrior who is revived every few generations to consume the souls of strong fighters. Ryu loses to Necalli, but before he can be devoured, Dhalsim steps in and Necalli teleports away by turning into a pile of ooze. No, seriously, that's how he travels around. He teleports by turning into puddles of goo. However, as Necalli vanishes, a strange object appears in the sky. An eclipse occurs as a massive floating artificial moon blocks out the sun. This is the big threat of the story. Shadaloo has launched these satellites called Black Moons that are going to wipe out power around the planet. They're doing this because Bison's psycho power is fueled by negative emotions like fear and anger, and casting the world into darkness will surely lead to the kind of chaos they need to power him up. We then jump to Rashid, who is investigating a Shadaloo site to try and find a friend of his, a video game programmer who Shadaloo kidnapped to help them build the Black Moons. Unfortunately, he meets up with Fong, a poison-using assassin and Bison's newest general, who defeats Rashid and sends him running off. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, wow, you're jumping all over the place with this summation. Problem number one with this story mode, it jumps all over the place. It just cuts with no flow between events, and because of that, time and space have no meaning in this story. It feels like scenes could either be seconds apart, or they could be separated by days. This entire story mode could maybe take place over the course of 2 or 3 days or a month and a half. You have no idea. And worst of all, characters are just there. There are so many moments where there's no build up to anything, a character is just randomly in a place because we needed them to be there. So you'll have a character who was half a world away, then they're just in the next scene like it was down the block. And there are so many scenes that feel like they had some kind of purpose, but because everything about this game was rushed and budgets were being bled dry with each passing day, they had to cut any payoff these scenes might have had. For example, in between everything that I was just talking about, we also cut to New York to see Alex in a wrestling match. A wrestling match with Zangief and Armika. Until Laura, who lives in Brazil, is just randomly there. She's not competing, she just hops into the ring for no reason. And that's the scene. There's no relevance to the plot. You don't actually get to have a fight between Geef and Alex, so you can't even say this was here just for gameplay reasons. You just see these 4 characters in the ring, and that's it. On to the next scene, even though one of those characters lives in Brazil and has 0 reason to be competing in this match. I guarantee you, they were originally going to cut back to this match, this big legendary brawl between Zangief and Alex about to start, when suddenly all the power would cut out and people in the crowd would start freaking out in order to show us the impact that the Black Moons were having. But they didn't have any time or money for that, so they had to take the scene they already made, keep that in, and then cut out everything that was supposed to lead into. I guarantee you that's what happened. Or at least I hope that's what happened, because otherwise they were just putting scenes in here that served no purpose. From there we see the remains of New York after people went nuts over the Black Moon shutting off all the power. We don't actually see that happen, only the aftermath, because we didn't have the budget to animate people panicking in the streets in a story where the villain is powered up by people panicking in the streets. Gal, Chun-Li, and Cammy show up to stop Bison and his team, but they're beaten. After the battle, Charlie and Rashid show up, trying to steal a small device from Guile. You see, the Black Moons can be stopped by using these little chess pieces, and Rashid's friend betrayed Shadaloo and sent these chess pieces to various strong fighters around the world. Rashid manages to steal the chess piece, and Gal and his team are left wondering if that really was Charlie, who didn't seem to care all that much about seeing Guile again. Cut to somewhere in... I'm going to guess Russia? Sure, let's go with that. Somewhere in Russia, it's revealed that Colleen has been organizing Charlie, Rashid, and several mercenaries like Juri to try and stop Shadaloo. And the upbeat wannabe hero Rashid is left feeling very out of place around psychopaths and Frankensteins.
You were also receiving similar information. Why do they keep ignoring me?
Okay, Street Fighter 5, I'll give you a point. That line read actually made me chuckle. You get 1 point for that. Urien then shows up and it's revealed that he funded Colleen's little experiment to revive Nash. Probably because he thought it would help him to take down Gil. Oops, spoilers for what's coming up later. At this point, it's worth pointing out, if you're wondering where this story takes place, it fits right between Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter 3. Yeah, after Street Fighter 4, a lot of fans were hoping that the next game would finally be moving past Street Fighter 3, but no luck. However, I will say, there's at least a reason why this is taking place before 3. They wanted this game to tell the story of how Sha Lu was finally defeated for good and link the older generation of Street Fighter games with Street Fighter 3. So, while I would have preferred us moving past 3, I do understand. They wanted to actually connect the story. There was at least good intent there.
Here comes a new challenger!
Hey, Thorgy?
Baberuthless, what are you doing here?
I heard you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life, so I had to rush here to stop you.
I already replayed the Street Fighter V story mode.
Oh, damn, sorry. Well, nothing to do now then. See ya.
Whoa, hold on, don't go anywhere just yet. You gotta come back and tag out for me real quick. Don't leave me alone with this thing. Come on, you know all kinds of fun, interesting facts about fighting games. There's gotta be something worth mentioning about Street Fighter V story mode.
Well, there is one kind of interesting thing about the story mode worth pointing out. This mode was kind of a big deal when it came out, partly because it was so bad it made the entire world question if we really needed story modes in fighting games, but also because of when it came out. Street Fighter V had taken on the live service model, releasing constant updates with brand new characters throughout the year. But when the story mode dropped, it included every character from Season 1, despite the fact that 2 of those characters hadn't dropped yet, Juri and Urien. But both of them got playable fights in the story, which gave players an early look at them long before they'd actually arrive. I remember seeing so many people playing through these story bits over and over, losing on purpose just to rematch the computers simply so they could learn these characters. Eventually, there were combo videos going up of them just based off of what people could figure out in these story matches. It's kind of a tribute to the ingenuity and dedication of the fighting game community.
You know, you're right, that actually is pretty interesting to think about. It's even more interesting when you realize that this story mode got delayed. We don't know when it was originally supposed to release, but if it had come out sooner, it might have ended up dropping before even Ibuki or Balrog had been released.
That's wild to think about. That would have meant that almost the entire first season of DLC would have been first debuted through the story mode.
Yeah. Although, you know how when this game came out, everybody was talking about how it lacked single-player content?
Yeah?
And people were also complaining that the starting roster of this game was significantly smaller than the starting roster of Street Fighter 4's home release?
Yeah.
And you know how this game also had massive problems during its development? The kind of problems that could lead to content being cut?
Thorgy, where are you going with this?
Oh, it's nothing. It's just a crazy random thought that I had that... Well, you know how this single-player story mode got delayed? And the exact kind of single-player content that this game probably really wanted to have at launch. And the entire first season of characters is playable in this single-player story mode. You know, when you put it like that, maybe, just maybe, Capcom realized that this game was taking so long to develop, and they were so low on funds, that maybe, just maybe, they might have possibly cut some of these characters from that starting roster, so that way they could charge everybody $30 down the road and put them out as a season of DLC characters.
Thorgy, there's no proof of that. You can't just throw around accusations. Tell me one time when Capcom did something sleazy with their fighting game DLC.
Street Fighter Cross Tekken.
Huh. Okay, name me a second time where they specifically cut characters from a fighting game so they could sell them as DLC within a year of this game's release.
Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite.
Okay, name me a third time where that exact thing happened.
Does Asura's Wrath count as a fighting game?
I feel like this conversation's getting off topic. Don't you have a story mode to go through?
Alright. Thank you very much for joining us here today, Baberuthless.
No problem. And if any of you out there want to deep dive into unique corners of fighting games, then you can find my channel, Baberuthless. I'm sure it's linked below in the description or something. Bye, Thorgy. Try not to go crazy when you get to that part with Charlie.
I make no promises. There's a lot more jumping around. Rashid goes to Karin's place to find another chess piece. Ken trains with Ryu when suddenly one of Karin's ninjas, which I guess she just has now, comes and asks them to assemble at Karin's place. But Ken tells Ryu to stay behind. The Satsui no Hado is clearly weighing on him. He has to stay behind until he can find some answers for that. All these heroes meet at Karin's place where they're attacked by Bison's dolls. And you know what? I'll go ahead and give the story another point because we finally got to see the dolls in action. They've always been in the background of the story, they're a big part of Cammy's origin, but outside of Decapre, Junie, and Julie, we never got to see the rest of them do anything. But in the story mode, you do get to see each of them as non-playable opponents with their own unique movesets. That's something that actually does take some work, so I'll go ahead and give them some credit for that. Speaking of the dolls, Ken has a scene with his son Mel, and Cammy watches this and starts to wonder if she'll ever have a normal family relationship. She thinks about how the dolls are the closest thing she has to a family, and she realizes she has to protect them. Cammy, Chun-Li, and Ken all travel down to Brazil to find the next chess piece, which is being held by Laura Matsuda. Ken ends up saving her brother Sean from Fong, which means this story does give us the origin of how Ken met Sean. Another example of how this game was trying to connect to Street Fighter 3. Laura then shows up and... just watch.
But you still look so thin as a rail! You must eat more meat, otherwise your girlfriend won't like you!
And that brings me to big problem number 2 with the story mode. What is this dialogue? This is some of the worst dialogue I have heard in not just any fighting game, but in any major studio release. All the jokey characters sound way too awkward, and everyone else is so stiff that it sounds like their lines were written by an AI and then ran through Google Translate.
What I'm trying to say is, that'll cover for you this time. But in exchange, when you complete your training, you must show me the result of all your effort.
Ken is known for his cocky bravado, his fiery attitude, his charm. Who is this guy sounding like a robot trying to pass itself off as a human? Next up, Zangief and Gal head to India to retrieve another one of the pieces that can control the Black Moons. You want an example of how poorly thought out this story was? This piece already belonged to Zangief, but he handed it off to an unnamed friend of his in India who we never see and has never spoken of again. So now they have to go and get it back. But there's another chess piece that was sent to Alex in New York, and Dhalsim has to go and retrieve it from him. I get that they said that Zangief handed the piece to a friend of his in India simply because they had an India stage, so they need an excuse to go back there. But Dhalsim is on the good guys team. He is also retrieving a piece for you. Why is Zangief going to India while Dhalsim challenges the pro wrestler? Just say Dhalsim is the one who got the chess piece and he left it back home for safe storage, so now they have to go and retrieve it. And then when they say another chess piece went to Alex, Zangief speaks up and says, "Oh, I know him. We fought in the ring not long ago. I'll go and get that one." And this is a fighting game story mode, so obviously you have to come up with excuses for characters to fight, but they are so desperate to figure out a reason why these characters would fight that when Alex sees Dhalsim, he thinks he's a mugger. He thinks the floating yoga master is a mugger because they just need an excuse for characters to fight. Have Zangief go to New York to get Alex's chess piece and then says, "Oh, you know, we never got to finish our match." And then the two of them go at because they have this unresolved fight from the very start of the game, and it ends with the two of them giving each other a big muscle power handshake. Listen, I don't want to do that thing where I just rewrite the story, but this one isn't a stretch. This is putting the square peg in the square hole. You have to actively try to not let this scene write itself. But while they're in India, Gal and Zangief are jumped by Balrog and another doll. But also joining them is Balrog's new partner in crime. Remember in his ending in Street Fighter 4 where Balrog finds some kid in the remains of the SIN labs with some strange powers? Well, Balrog originally rescued the kid because he thought he could make some kind of money off this kid's powers. But several years have passed since that last game, and now after multiple growth spurts, Ed and Balrog are a team. And as we would see in later story modes, they actually kind of care about each other, even if they won't admit it. The bond between Balrog and Ed is one of the actual nice bits of character development throughout Street Fighter V's life. Although speaking of Ed, this has been bugging me. Ed has psycho power because he was experimented upon with the intent of him becoming a new backup body for Bison. Does Bison know about Ed? Seriously, one of his top-ranking generals took a kid that he was planning on putting his soul inside of. Does Bison know about that, or does he just not care? Is he like, "Yes, good Balrog. Keep an eye on that body, I might need it later." Or maybe he just doesn't care, like, "Ha, What do I need with that failed experiment? I have no use for it anymore. Or does Bison just not know about Ed? Is Balrog hiding that he's got a mini Bison body just hanging around because he knows that if his boss finds out, then he'll have both their heads? You could use this for some great character exploration, like Balrog knows he should hand Ed over to Bison. He could even make a really nice payday off it. But he wants to keep the kid secret because he's actually started to care about him. Maybe there comes that moment where Bison finds out about Ed and Balrog is faced with the choice of handing him over or turning on Bison. And then we get a fight between Balrog and Bison as the greedy boxer finds something he actually cares about more than money. Or we could just not bring it up. That's also an option, I guess. But back to Brazil, Ken and his team are attacked by Decapre, but after knocking her out, the police then show up to take her in. And Cammy, thinking about Decapre and how she's been trying to save her sisters, she can't let them do that. And she engages in a fight with Peter the Cop, who kind of became a little bit of a meme for the Street Fighter community after this story mode came out, merely for the fact that A, there was this random fight with a cop, and B, they actually bothered to give him a name. But yes, Cammy goes rogue and rebels to save her sister. And at this point, I've already brought it up several times, but I think that we can finally put it up on the big board. Problem number 3, this story mode is so poorly thought out. I've already given examples, but this one really did for me. Cammy rebelling against everyone for Decapre because she thinks of her as a sister that she must save. Hey, that's a good story point. Here's the problem. She rebels because the cops tried to take Decapre in. Shadaloo is an international terrorist organization, and Cammy and Chun-Li work for MI6 and Interpol. You guys outrank the local cops on this one. Literally, all you had to do was say, "It's all right, officers, I'll take it from here," and then flash your badge, and you're good. Worst case scenario, they might have to call your boss to verify. Listen, I get that it's a fighting game story mode, so you need excuses for characters to fight each other. But was there no other reason that you could possibly have come up with to shove a fight in here? Was there nobody else that Cammy could possibly have fought to protect Decapre? Oh, hi, Juri! Yes, Juri, a big major villain introduced in the last game, then pops up. And remember how Juri hated Bison and was willing to kill anyone between her and Bison? And now she's working with someone, sending her out on missions to take down Bison? Well, here we have Decapre, a brainwashed soldier for Bison, and Cammy swearing she'll protect her no matter what. If you needed a fight in this scene, have Juri try to take Decapre and Cammy has to stop her. Seriously, you needed a fight in this scene and it is sitting right there. But no, instead, Juri decides she's going to help Cammy and Decapre. For no reason. Now, I know someone out there is going to argue for this. They're going to say, no, Juri helped Cammy because when she saw Cammy there trying to help her family, it made Juri think back to when her own family was killed by Bison, and it caused her to relate to Cammy, and her cold, dark heart actually grew a little that day. And to that I say, that's a great fanfic you just wrote in your head, but it's not in this game. We saw none of that actually happen. What we saw in this story was Juri deciding to help Cammy because the story just said that needed to happen. But we'll get back to that unlikely duo in a second.
Oh no, we won't.
Here comes a new challenger.
We're sticking with them because this part of the game is too bad to get off that easily.
Nick! Oh, thank God. Please tell me that you're here to talk about an actual good fighting game like Killer Instinct or something.
Thorgy. I'm always here to talk about Killer Instinct, but not today. No. Today, I want to keep talking about this story mode.
Why the hell would anyone want to talk about this story mode? I've been talking about it for the past half hour and I'm ready to chew my own foot off so I can escape this thing.
Well, I mean, the thumbnail and title indicates that you're going to be talking about the Street Fighter V story mode, so to suddenly talk about Killer Instinct, Thorgy, probably would not be good for audience retention. But also, the story mode isn't just bad, it's like hilariously bad. And when I heard that you were covering it, I needed to jump in here with my own 2 cents. The story mode is almost a decade old, and to this day, my wife and I still reference it because it just cracks us up that much. Just not in any of the ways that the developers probably intended. And man, I had to spotlight this Brazil scene because it's the perfect microcosm of everything wrong with the story mode. horrible dialogue, a story that just really didn't think any plot points out, and, of course, this scene.
What have you been doing around here? And look at your hair! I know what it is! You must have found a girlfriend!
Man, just when you were thinking that the third strike nerfs were the worst thing to happen to Sean, here he is face deep in his sister's... You get it, it's bad. And look, Street Fighter's always had a sense of humor to it that borders on wacky, but the humor in this game feels so awkward. Like, you know that the guy who came up with the scene was cracking up at it, but you can also tell that nobody else in the room was laughing. Also, is it just me, or is it painfully uncomfortable that Sean and Laura are...
Yes, it is. It's very weird. We don't need to talk about it.
You know what? Good call. But here's my favorite thing in this scene, though. Juri rides off on her motorcycle with Cammy and DiCapri, apparently all the way to London, because after another scene, we then return to them as they come crashing through the window of the London stage. Capcom, you do understand how editing works, right? Like, if we see a character drive off wildly on a motorcycle with two other characters, one of whom is unconscious, and then the next time we see them, they're in a totally different country, half a planet away, but still wildly driving on that same motorcycle, still carrying the unconscious party member, we're gonna think they literally drove across the ocean and it only took them like half an hour. Either that or Brazil has a secret little London town in the Street Fighter universe for some reason. I mean, when they drive off in Brazil, we see Vega watching them, then he appears in London to fight them. You couldn't have framed this any better to make it look like London was at the bottom of the hill they were just on. This transition was so bad that in Street Fighter 6, I'm not making this up, Juri talks about this scene, and they had to show them traveling on a boat just to make it clear that no, they didn't drive across the ocean. And that's not even the only time that Street Fighter 6 had to play damage control for this absurd story.
Don't get too far ahead of me on this one. We'll save the Street Fighter 6 stuff for the next video.
Fine. I'm just gonna leave it there. But if you ever need somebody to fanboy forever about Killer Instinct or something, hit me up on Twitter and Blue Sky at NervousNick, or you can find me on Twitch under the same name. I've kind of been meaning to scratch this KI itch on stream for a while now, so come stop on by.
Alright, back to the story where we're now following Karin's team as they infiltrate Bison's base, only to run into Rashid and Charlie because, again, this story jumps all over the place so much, characters are just wherever they need to be for the plot to progress. They get all the chess pieces together and they put them in place to shut off the Black Moons, only to then learn that there was a failsafe in place that caused the moons to come crashing down to the Earth if they happen to be shut off. Oh, also Abel is here. Remember Abel from the last game? Yeah, apparently he's just been working undercover as a Shadowloo soldier. Yes, you heard correct. The guy who was created to be a Bison body prototype is now just walking around Shadowloo's base and nobody noticed. You think he ever ran to Ed and the two of them just gave each other a little head nod and were like, listen, I won't say anything if you don't. But as the moon's failsafe gets activated, the latent evil psycho power in Abel activates and he goes on a rampage. Charlie then fights Bison and loses, only for their battle to be interrupted by Necalli. Hey, remember Necalli? The guy who was set up as the big threat at the start of the story mode, and we haven't seen him for a freaking hour? Yeah, he's just here now. Because remember, say it with me everyone, in Street Fighter V, characters are just wherever they need to be for the story to progress. Necalli then chases everyone out of the base in a scene that looks so goofy, Yakety Sax might as well be playing over it. Then as they're escaping, Charlie is hanging out with Karin's Quinjet and Guile reaches out to bring him back up, and yeah, okay, that's kinda nice. Unfortunately, that's pretty much the only connection these two get in the entire story. No, seriously, after this, they get back to Karin's mansion, Charlie uses his new Frankenstein powers to suck the psycho energy out of Abel, and Guile tosses Charlie his dog tags, and he just walks away. Guile practically destroyed his entire life, going on a one-man mission of revenge to make Bison pay for killing Charlie, and when they finally meet again, all we get is a sup, and then they walk away. Nothing. No speech, no, hey, is there any message you want me to give someone? No final words from Charlie to Guile for everything they've been through. No discussion about, you know, after I thought you were dead, I swore I would make Bison pay. Like, nothing! Nothing at all! But as bad as that is, it is better than what Abel got. Remember that Abel had amnesia, but he remembers he was saved by Charlie Nash. That was a huge part of his backstory, and he had been chasing down any information he could get on Charlie. And all Abel gets is, as Charlie is walking away, Abel just says,
Nash? Huh?
And that's it. Abel wanted to thank Charlie for what he did, and instead, all he gets to say is, oh hey, was that the guy? And then he walks away. He doesn't even shout out thank you as he's walking off into the sunset. You didn't even have to animate Abel doing that. You could just focus on Charlie and then have Abel doing some ADR. God damn, this story is lazy. Well, while all of this was happening, as Nick mentioned earlier, Juri and Cammy and DiCaprio arrive in London where they're confronted by Vega. And I'm bringing this scene up because, oh dear God, I was waiting for the right moment to bring this up, and that moment is now. Problem number 4, this game looks bad. I mentioned it in our retrospective that there's tons of hair and clothes clipping and twitching, but it doesn't show up that much in the actual combat. It was really only on the select screen where you were forced to sit and stare at these graphics that it looked bad. This story mode is nothing but sitting and staring at these graphics, and they look atrocious. Hair is constantly glitching, clothing is flickering or fading through body parts, and in the regular game, the oil painting style made the characters look like clay. But when you see these models on display at angles you were never supposed to see, oh God, there are moments where they just look like walking Play-Doh. Again, if you missed the main retrospective episode where we talked about the development, the team behind this game was forced to work on an engine that they had no experience with. But it isn't until you're going through this story mode that you realize it was basically being held together by duct tape, and a strong gust of wind would have made this entire game crash. Although, I don't want to blame their inexperience with this engine too much, because they were also inexperienced with just knowing how a story mode works. Because going back through this story mode for this video, I realized, oh my God, no one on this staff knew how to frame a shot. There are so many shots in this story mode where characters' faces are just being blocked out, not for any kind of big reveal, just because they didn't know, hey, if you have a character model standing in front of the person talking, that doesn't look good. Well, sticking with Juri and Cammy, they arrive back at Colleen's base, and yes, having the two teams in this game being led by characters named Colleen and Karin has been very difficult to keep straight, and I am positive I have mixed them up at some point in this video. But back at the base, Colleen tries to keep Charlie in line, but he says he knows he's going to die. This body of his can't keep going for long, so with his final moments, he has to make sure that Bison dies. Wow, that's setting up a very dramatic moment in the story, right? I mean, you'd think so. You'd have to be crazy to set up something that dramatic for a character and then not resolve. Anyway, we then cut back to Karin's mansion, and Necalli is now just here. But then Ryu reappears, but he's acting a little bit different now. He fights Necalli and then closes his eyes as a dark energy comes over him, which he then overcomes and proceeds to punch Necalli, causing him to dissolve into a pile of goo, making a face that really sums this story up. That is a face that says we really had to get this game out the door now. And that brings me to problem number 5. Necalli. Yes, Necalli is gone. He has been defeated without adding anything to the story or mattering in any way. This dude opened up the game haunting Charlie as some mysterious oncoming threat. He then stomps down Ryu, the face of the series. Then when the black moons rise up, Ryu has a vision. He sees Bison turn towards him, but he also sees a pair of eyes. And I think the assumption we're all supposed to make is that those eyes belong to Necalli, like somehow Necalli is tied to these black moons. He's this ancient creature that appears every couple hundred years to devour souls. Maybe there's some kind of a prophecy about a day in which the sun would be blocked out, and Bison in his quest for power accidentally awakens a creature that's even more deadly than him. Doesn't that sound interesting? Or at least, I don't know, better than freaking nothing? Because after that scene, this story forgot about him for over half of its runtime. He appears for no reason at Bison's base, where he does nothing, and then Ryu just one-shots him. This was a mythical warrior who devours the souls of strong fighters. He literally has the Street Fighter V logo on his face. He is the first threat we see in the story, with everything around him being mysterious. He was absolutely meant to be a bigger threat in this game. And I don't know where along the lines they just dropped that, but they dropped it so hard you could hear the resulting impact from space. Maybe it was a time issue. Maybe they realized they only had time to focus on either Bison or Necalli, and they had to tell the story of Bison's defeat, so they ended up just having to sweep Necalli off the stage, taking what was supposed to be a major threat, and turning him into whatever this is. But that isn't the biggest issue with this scene. Problem number 6, and one of the 2 reasons why I will argue up and down with anyone that this is the worst fighting game story mode. You might be wondering what Ryu did, why he was able to defeat Necalli. Simple! Because the Satsui no Hado, the thing that has been haunting Ryu for generations now, the thing that has been the driving force of his character, the giant hill he has had to climb for multiple games now, going all the way back to the mid-90s, Ryu finally overcame the Satsui no Hado. And he did it off screen! The last time we saw Ryu, he lost to Necalli because he couldn't hold back the Satsui no Hado. Then Ken told him, you just keep training until you can overcome it. Then he just shows up, and he did it. He beat the Satsui no Hado. That storyline is just done now. Literally 2 decades of storytelling resolved off screen. And I've heard some people say it wasn't resolved off screen. We see him overcoming it when that dark mist fades away. I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. He shows up with newfound confidence and is dodging attacks like he can see the Matrix now. Even if this is the exact moment when he overcomes it, he still figured out how to overcome it off screen. He still found out how to defeat it when no one was looking, with no explanation. Imagine if you were making a Justice League movie, and Superman gets benched early on because the villain of the film is using kryptonite. Superman can't touch him, so Batman says, you have to stay behind until you can figure this out. Then Superman is just gone for the next hour. Then he just shows up, walks up to the villain, and smacks the kryptonite out of his hand and says, oh yeah, that doesn't work on me anymore. With no further explanation given and no questions asked. That's how lazy this is. And you might be thinking, well, how could you have shown Ryu overcoming it in an interesting way? What, you just wanted to see him meditating for an hour? And to that I say, the Satsui no Hado is the darkness inside of Ryu. And this is a fighting game. Mirror match. Have him start meditating, and then he goes into a dream state where he has to fight himself. Done. You don't even have to program another character into the game. Although if you did want to do the extra work, have it be a 2-round fight. For the first stage of the fight, he imagines himself fighting his dark self on Ryu's stage. He has to overcome himself. Makes sense you'd be on Ryu's stage. Plus, you already got that stage in the game. Easy. Done. Then, for the second round of the fight, you get transported to the Field of Fate, a classic stage that's important to Ryu's lore since that's where he first felt the effects of the Satsui no Hado, and it's a simple stage. It's not that hard to make. You just program in there a patch of grass and repeat it endlessly. And now in the second round, Ryu's Dark Reflection can fire out red fireballs, or he can do the Raging Demon, just like Akuma can. 2 moves that, again, aren't that hard to program. The Raging Demon is just a slide animation, followed by the screen kinda black. It would have been so easy to give us something in this moment. And instead, all we got was this. Now, for all the big lore fans out there, I'm going to do something that this game didn't do and explain something to you guys. In case you're wondering why Ryu started glowing right here, that's because Ryu finally obtained something known as the power of nothingness, or Mu-no-Ken. This is essentially the opposite of the Satsui no Hado. It's achieving a state of consciousness and understanding beyond emotions, when all hatred and fear leaves you and you can now overcome your inner demons. It has been brought up in the lore before. It's actually how Goken was able to survive Akuma doing a raging demon on him when they were younger. And in the Street Fighter 4 animated movie, Ken Masters actually showed that he can even tap into it. And as for Ryu, we've seen him tap into it in the comics and mangas before, so it was nice for him to finally obtain it in the canonical games. Would have been even better if we had seen it actually happen, but hey, I guess you can't have everything. Okay, let's keep going. All the heroes then go back to Bison's base in an attempt to stop him once again, and they proceed to jump out of a helicopter with no chutes on and then land at—
Okay, Brother Thorgy, hold up for just 1 minute.
Here comes a new challenger.
Rizzy, if you're here to complain about Necalli, it's too late. He's already dead. If you're here to complain about Charlie, you're a little bit too early.
Alright, whatever. But no, I'm here to talk about whatever the hell is going on in this scene right here. Because this, whatever the hell jankness they got going on, this is another reason why Street Fighter fans complain so much about this story.
Hey, are we gonna jump from way up here?
Whoa! Are you guys serious?
Oh, don't worry. I already talked about the graphics.
Nah, not that. Well, okay, yeah, maybe that too. But no, I'm talking about problem number... What number are we on again? 7?
Sure, whatever. Let's go with that.
All right, problem number 7. What even is this? Because it isn't Street Fighter. Street Fighter had a tone to it. It was meant to be, well, street level. And yeah, there were megalomaniacal dictators with magical powers, but at the end of the day, it was supposed to feel like a martial arts film. The star of this series is just a guy traveling the world with a duffel bag. The main settings of these games have always been tournaments with boxers and wrestlers and kung fu masters just throwing hands. There was still that street level feeling to it, just martial artists getting mixed up with some big threat. But this? Yeah, nah, this ain't that. This is now Karin leading a special task force of powerful heroes on a world-spanning adventure to save the planet from a Death Star. Which means this isn't Street Fighter, this is... G.I. Joe, American hero. G.I. Joe is there. The only Street Fighter thing this feels like is the 90s Street Fighter cartoon where they were blatantly trying to rip off G.I. Joe. Remember the time they made G.I. Joe Street Fighter toys? Yeah, that's essentially what this is right here.
You know, in the video where we talked about the Street Fighter movie, we did mention that back after Street Fighter 2 came out, Capcom did have an idea to turn this franchise into a G.I. Joe style series, where everyone was part of some special military organization going around the world fighting villains. And yeah, you have a point. When playing through this story mode, it feels like somebody looked at the past 20 years of Street Fighter and said, yeah, why didn't we ever go with the G.I. Joe idea?
And look, nothing against G.I. Joe, but G.I. Joe isn't Street Fighter and Street Fighter is not G.I. Joe. Like, Ken Masters will fight all bad guys if they come for him, but at his heart, he's just a guy who wants to enter martial arts tournaments, not put on tights and a cape to find supervillains. Okay, yeah, there was the one time in Street Fighter Cross Tekken when he dressed up as a superhero that looked like Lars, but we ain't gonna talk about that right now. Supervillains just keep coming for him.
Yeah, that drove me nuts. I mean, like, I love Zangief, and he's a good dude. If he sees a bad guy, he'll try and stop him. But he's a wrestler. His top priority is wrestling. He goes around the planet so he can get into the ring and fight strong opponents. And this story mode has him boarding the Blackbird so he can go off and fight Dr. Doom. Also, why the hell is Karin the one who was organizing all this? She was the spoiled rich girl who just wanted to prove that she was better than Sakura. Why is she now leading the most powerful independent military task force on the planet?
Hey, yo, Thorgy, you good? Cause it sounded like you're about to start going off again.
I mean, if they wanted to slowly turn her into this type of a character, sure, that'd be fine. Have her slowly progress over the course of multiple installments. But this is the first time we've seen her since that last game. And yes, I know in Street Fighter Alpha 3 she calls down an airstrike on Xiaolu, but that was a non-canonical joke ending. Why is that now her defining character trait?
Okay, yep. Brother Thorgy is gone. And on that note, I'm gonna head on up out of here while he's going off. I appreciate y'all for letting me talk to y'all for a minute, and you can catch me on Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, all at Ignant Rizzy, and catch me on YouTube at Ignant Rizzy X. I will catch y'all later.
If she wanted to get strong fighters together, why wouldn't she go with Sakura, the girl who used to always beat her and everything? And, oh, bye Rizzy. Where was I again? All right, problem number 8. Why is everyone so out of character in this game?
There's maybe like 5 characters who actually feel like themselves. But Karin is now Nick Fury, Ken is stiff and lifeless as a board, Juri doesn't give a crap about Bison or anything else that was her driving motivation in the last game. Charlie, listen, the dude came back from the dead, he's obsessed with taking down Bison, I get it, that's going to change a guy. But there isn't a shred of the Charlie we used to know in there. And if you want me to feel for him, he needs to at some point show me some sign of his former self. Some sign that he's still in there. Otherwise, he might as well just be a robot shaped like Charlie. And the big one that I have to bring up. Birdie. Okay, not the one you were probably expecting, but hear me out. Birdie used to be a big buff guy and now he's packed on some pounds. And listen, I said it all the way back in our very first episode of this retrospective, but one of my favorite things about Street Fighter, heck, one of my favorite things about fighting games is that they include characters from different walks of life, all different backgrounds, different countries, and that extends to different body types. I want more representation of different body types in fighting games, and that includes overweight characters. I would love to see more positive representation of overweight characters in games. And hey, if you decide to bring an older character back and make them overweight now, that's fine, as long as you handle it well. This is not handled well. This is actually insulting. Because Birdie, sure, he was treated like a joke in the previous games, but he still had his own thing going for him. He was this big tough guy who didn't take anything from anybody. He was a punk, he was a bruiser who wanted to run his neighborhood and wanted to rise in ranks among the other villains. Literally, all of that is gone now. There is nothing to Birdie in this game other than these developers trying to make fun of fat people. And hey, they used Rufus to make fat jokes in the last game as well, but at least Rufus was also a biker. He had his obsession with Ken Masters. He was also an idiot who couldn't tell who Ken Masters was. Okay, fine. But that was at least still something unique to him. There is nothing to Birdie except for fat jokes. Every single line out of his mouth now is,
If you escape, they won't feed me anymore!
Alright, back to the story. Where were we now? Alright. So everyone just jumped out of a helicopter without chutes on, because that's what this story is now, apparently. So they all start fighting the dolls. Again, it's cool that after all these years we got to see the dolls in action. And speaking of that, Cammy shows up to rescue the dolls, and DiCaprio comes too and starts fighting alongside Cammy, and hey, that's good. Actual story progression is happening here. But at this point, it's just really hard to care about anything in this story. I can't lie, after those last couple of scenes, I'm starting to get beaten down.
Thorgy, wait, hold on!
Here comes a new challenger!
I know this story is getting to you, but you can't give up now! You're so close to the end! And that ending turned everything around!
It did?
Yeah, that ending was great! Alright, listen, I'll admit the story's kinda dull to start, and a lot of characters get ignored, and the narrator's really boring. But when you get to the end and you have that big climactic final battle in the volcano, and Heat Hate Shadow kicks in, oh, it's one of the best moments in this entire series.
Ultima, I think you're talking about the story mode of Tekken 7. We're still talking about the story mode of Street Fighter 5.
Oh, wait, you're still on Street Fighter? I thought you were supposed to be done with that months ago. Aren't you supposed to be doing a Tekken retrospective by now?
Thank you, Ultima. Yes, I am behind schedule. Thank you very much for reminding me of that. Thank you. So, what about this game's story mode? Have anything that you want to say about it?
Of course I do. There's tons of great moments, but honestly, none of them even come close to touching this one.
Begin! Watch out, Master Zangief! What? That's incredible! Totally awesome!
Yeah, okay, that's actually pretty cool.
Right? Zangief is so great in this story. He really was just oozing with so much charisma and personality every time he was on screen. And I love his chemistry with Armika. Leaning into making Zangief more of this big grappling teddy bear who's all about muscle power and putting on a show was such a great direction for his character, and I think most people agreed.
Yeah, okay, I know I just said I don't like Zangief being portrayed almost like a superhero traveling around the world to stop bad guys, but just in terms of his personality, I do actually like the direction they went with this character in here. So yeah, okay, that's a positive, I'll give you that one. So what else is good about this story mode?
Oh, of course, okay, alright, I'll be honest, I don't think I got anything else.
What?
Yeah, honestly, that story was kinda trash, dude. Anyways, best of luck, Thorgy!
Ultima, everybody! Go follow him on Twitch! Should I clap? I feel like I should clap.
Okay, all joking aside, there actually is something in this story that I think is genuinely good. Not, oh, it got a chuckle out of me, good. No, I mean there is an actually good character moment in here. Rashid learned from Colleen that his programmer friend had put into the system a way to stop the moons from crashing down to the Earth that only he knew. Now, we had heard earlier that Rashid's friend was a video game programmer who was always getting into trouble, and Rashid always had to come in there and help her out. Rashid gets to the computer, and now the message on the screen says, "Light up the pathway for those who stray, I call thy name." And the answer to this puzzle is Rashid of the Turbulent Wind. The reason I say this is a genuinely good moment is because Rashid is always acting like some over-the-top hero with lots of bravado and courage. He's declaring himself Rashid of the Turbulent Wind, like it's an actual superhero title. So the way I see it, there's two ways that you can read into this scene. One, either that's just how Rashid is. He's big and bombastic and full of bravado, but as we see throughout this story from everyone else's reaction to him, he's not the big hotshot that he makes himself out to be. He's actually kind of a joke. Nobody else takes him seriously, and yeah, that does get to him. But he was always there to help his friend. So in this moment, it's kind of like his friend is saying, no matter how other people saw him, he was a hero to her. Or, the other way you can read this, his friend was a game developer. And when he enters Rashid of the Turbulent Wind into the computer, a little cartoon Rashid pops up. This might be me reading way too much into it, but maybe this Turbulent Wind persona was a character. Maybe it was some big, bright, shining hero who Rashid's friend created for a game based off of Rashid himself because that's how she always saw him. He was always there to help her out, so to thank him, she made some character based on how she thought of him. And when she got kidnapped, Rashid knew that he had to save her. But he wasn't a hero. He wasn't someone who could take on a threat like Shadaloo. So, to give himself courage, he took on the Turbulent Wind character that his friend had created. She needed a hero to come and save her, so he became one. I don't know which of these two possibilities they were going for, probably the first one, but either way, both of them are great character moments for Rashid and they're both pretty touching. Yeah, no notes on this one. This is a genuinely good moment. But then Fong arrives and is stunned to see Rashid stopping the moons from falling. But then Fong reveals what we all kind of knew from the start. Fong already killed Rashid's friend. He did it right before Rashid arrived in the opening of the game. Rashid is then overcome with rage and Fong tries to poison him only to discover that Rashid is a hard counter to Fong. With his newfound anger, Rashid is constantly kicking up a whirlwind around him, blowing Fong's poison away, and Rashid, along with the help of a doll named Mars breaking free of her brainwashing, managed to stop the poison assassin. Although not without Mars dying in the process. Which, okay, this whole scene with Rashid and the code and then stopping Fong is the best moment in the story. But I just have to throw this out there. Rashid just learned that he failed to save his friend. Then we have Mars here, another victim of Shadaloo, who is also a computer programmer, who also ends up dying right in front of him. The story should have had Rashid save Mars. The guy who fails to save his friend from being killed by someone, then saving someone else from dying to that exact same person. Yeah, it's a bit of a cliche, but it works. It would have been a nice little end for Rashid's story. But Rashid does still get one final moment to step up as a wave of Shadaloo soldiers come in to try and stop the code he input from being activated. And I will admit, I am a sucker for those hero has to hold the line to buy everyone time scenes, so yeah, this is also a pretty good moment. Man, it feels weird giving this story so many compliments. Is there something right after this moment that I can complain about? Oh, hey, it's Charlie! Yes, Charlie Nash confronts Bison and finally gets his run back against the man that killed him. However, Bison is too strong and it looks like this is the end, only for Nash to grab a hold of Bison and supercharges his body, exploding, dying again, but this time taking the devilish dictator out with him. Or never mind, Bison can emerge completely unharmed, meaning that Charlie, the guy who came back to life specifically so he could face Bison, the man who had been laser focused on taking down Bison for the past 2 hours, the man who, when he realized he only had a few days left to live, said that no matter what, he had to stop Bison, didn't accomplish anything. He died without even leaving a scratch on Bison. His entire story amounted to nothing. Charlie Nash, the character who opened the game and was one of the major driving forces of the entire story, served no point to that story. Do I even have to say that we're adding this one to the problem board? In the end, it was Ryu who faced down Bison, and hey, I get, he's the face of the franchise. You want him to be the one to take down Bison. But did Charlie have to accomplish nothing? I mean, in all fairness, Charlie even admits he doesn't think he can stop Bison. But he believes the other characters can, so he wants to use his final few moments to try and help make that possible. But he doesn't. He contributes nothing in the end. And there is so much you could have done. Bison's powers were at an all-time high because of the Black Moons. So if you had to have Ryu be the one to beat him, why not have Charlie sacrifice himself in an explosion? Then Bison walks out of the cloud of smoke acting like he's fine, but then suddenly his powers start fluctuating and he says something like, "What? What did he do to me?" And we see that Charlie was able to disrupt his psycho powers and now he can't contain it all, severely weakening Bison, making it possible for our heroes to stop him. Or have Charlie blow up and Bison seems fine, but there's a small crack forming on his chin. Remember, his body is artificial after all, so you could have Charlie damage it in that sort of way. Just a little tiny crack on his big impervious body. Then when Ryu's fighting him, he can't figure out how to beat him. Then he notices the crack on his chin, and he delivers a big shoryuken to it, which causes Bison's artificial body to start breaking apart. There are ways that you can have Ryu beat Bison and still let Charlie's sacrifice matter. Let him contribute in some way to taking Bison down. Or hell, I said I didn't want to come in here and just pitch out other ways that this story could have gone and try and rewrite the story, but we're too far in now, so screw it. If you wanted Ryu to be the one to stop Bison, you could still have had Charlie do something else. Like, his entire goal this whole time has been to stop Bison. It's been literally the only thing he's cared about in this entire game. So much so that he lost all traces of his former personality. So what if, after Rashid takes out Fong, Rashid then passes out, and Charlie is on his way to stop Bison when he sees the wave of Shadaloo soldiers on their way to restart the moons, and he has to decide between getting his revenge or saving the world. And then that old Nash, the hero Nash, comes through again, and he decides to give up his quest of vengeance, and then he spends his final few moments stopping these soldiers so he can save the world, with his last thoughts being that he's going to leave stopping Bison up to his friends because he trusts them. Am I just writing a Street Fighter fanfic at this moment? Who cares? There was literally no point to one of the biggest driving forces of this entire story. Throw out any ideas you want at this point, any of them would have to be better than this. Or hell, crazy idea, hear me out. Don't have Ryu be the one to stop Bison. Why does he have to do it? His storyline was about overcoming the Satsui no Hado and stopping Necalli. I know it might not have seemed like that since it all happened off screen and this story forgot about Necalli, but yes, that was his storyline for this game. And that was resolved. So why did he also have to stop Bison? I know that Bison tried to take Ryu's body so he could have its power, but that was like a few months out of Ryu's life, and he already stopped him for that. Ryu has had other things to worry about in all that time. But Charlie, Guile, Chun-Li, all of them have more of a vendetta against Bison. Why not let them take him down? Heck, make the final fight a raid boss style, where Bison has 3 times his health bar, and you control all 3 characters, one after the other, to try and take him down. Charlie and Guile working side by side again in his final few moments, and then as they finally stop Bison, Guile gets a moment to say goodbye to Charlie before he shuts down. I'm not even trying that hard to come up with ideas, they're sitting right there for anyone to take. Or heck, you want me to really make a reach on this one? Remember earlier when Necalli showed up to Bison's base in a scene that didn't really make any sense and added nothing to the overall plot? Yeah, there was no reason for Necalli to be there. Well, remember earlier when Ryu had that vision and he saw M. Bison and those big Necalli eyes staring back at him? Let's say that M. Bison caused the eclipse not just so that he could power himself up with all the chaos it would cause, but because he knew about this ancient creature, and he knew there was some prophecy that if you caused an eclipse, it would reawaken Necalli. And M. Bison is always trying to put his soul into some strong body. Maybe he wanted to reawaken Necalli so that way he could lure him out, then put his soul inside of him. So let's say earlier, at that scene when Necalli was in M. Bison's base for no reason at all, M. Bison then captures him because that was his plan all along. He captures Necalli, he's going to put his soul inside there, and make himself truly unstoppable, turn himself into a god. So here, at the end of the story, Guile, Chun-Li, and Charlie all have to stop M. Bison, the guy who each of them have a vendetta against, and then Ryu goes into the base to stop Necalli, the guy who beat him in the beginning of the game, so that way no one can ever use his powers for evil again. Again, I know I'm going a little bit into fanfic territory on this one, but if you did this, Guile, Chun-Li, and Charlie would all get their revenge against Bison. Ryu would get his run back from that loss he had at the beginning of the game. That prophecy vision thing that Ryu had at the beginning would actually mean something. There would actually have been a purpose to Necalli breaking into M. Bison's base during that scene. And also you would have tied Necalli into M. Bison, so that way you wouldn't just randomly have this ancient god running around for no reason whatsoever. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I think what I just described was originally the idea behind this story mode, because I didn't notice this while I was playing through the game, probably because I just desperately wanted this entire thing to be over, but when I was going back through the footage for this review, something occurred to me. When Necalli shows up to M. Bison's base for no reason, M. Bison looks at him and says,
I've been waiting for you. Everything is going according to plan.
And now that I've gotten through this story mode, and we've seen that Necalli didn't matter at all, and he didn't tie in with Bison's story in any way, it raises the question, Bison, what the hell are you talking about? Why were you expecting Necalli? How do you even know who Necalli is? And what plan of yours does he possibly tie into, and how? Those 2 lines make it so clear that either they had no plan for this story mode because they were so behind schedule that they just had to make it up as they went along, or there was some kind of a plan for Necalli in this story mode. He was going to tie into Bison in some way, but they ended up getting so behind schedule, they had to scrap whatever plans they had, and they just had to cobble together whatever possible solution they could come up with. I'd like to think it was the latter. It was probably the former. But no matter what they had planned, in the end, Charlie Nash dies again, accomplishing nothing. Then Ryu takes on Bison. But not before we get one more fight. Chun-Li finds Li Fin, a young computer genius who Shadaloo also kidnapped to program the Black Moons, and she's about to rescue her until Fong reappears because Rashid didn't actually defeat him. And then Chun-Li has to be the one to stop him. Why is Chun-Li the one to stop Fong? Because we are at the penultimate fight in this game. 2 hours into it, and Chun-Li, one of the 3 big faces of this series, hasn't had a single fight in this entire game. There were 2 fights where you controlled characters going up against Chun-Li, but this is the first time you actually get to control her. That's right, she didn't get a single fight in this entire game, and now at the very end, she has to fight someone she probably doesn't even know. This story was so poorly thought out and so rushed. They didn't realize until the very end, oh crap, we never gave Chun-Li something to do. So they just threw Fong at her. Which brings me to problem who cares, I stopped counting at this point, and the other reason why I will die on the hill that this is the worst fighting game story mode. Almost nobody has any resolution to their stories. Did Charlie get revenge on Bison? No. Chun-Li get revenge on Bison? No. Did Gao get to reconnect with Charlie after years of trying to avenge him? Well, he threw him his dog tags. Does that count? No. In fact, speaking of that, does Gao get to do anything in this, the big final battle against the guy he's been fighting most of his adult life? No. After Charlie blows up, he starts running off to challenge him Bison. Fong appears. Chun-Li fights Fong, Ryu fights him Bison. Guile is just not in the story anymore, despite being there with the both of them right before this happened. Juri swore revenge against Bison and built her whole life around taking him down. But she's a villain, so of course she wasn't going to be the one to stop him, that makes sense. But did she at least get to confront him, or even see him in this story? No. Well, hey now, hold on. Rashid got to avenge his friend by taking down Fong. That is a resolution, and oh, wait, no, they forgot to do anything with Chun-Li, so now Rashid isn't the one to stop Fong. Chun-Li is, despite Chun-Li not having any connection to that character at all. Okay, here's one I'll give you. Cammy helped DiCaprio and got her to break free of her brainwashing, and that is a resolution. But, can't help but point out, Cammy also has 2 fights in this game against Vega. Why am I bringing that up? Because remember, Vega used to torture Cammy when she was a doll. It's even heavily implied that he's the one that scarred up her face. Heck, he tortured all the dolls. He's a crazed serial killer who enjoyed tormenting the people who Cammy thinks of as her sisters. Cammy has a huge bone to pick with Vega. Guess what? You play as Vega in both of those fights, so that way he can still beat Cammy. Who the hell on this staff said, oh, this is the story of how Shadaloo collapsed? Well, make sure that psycho serial killer Vega gets off scot-free. No! Have Cammy beat Vega and send him to jail, avenging all her doll sisters. That's how that story ends. And speaking of the Shadaloo generals, what happened to Balrog? The entire base is collapsing around him. Shouldn't he fight someone? Oh no, he and Ed just walk out of there without saying a single word. Almost like they forgot he was there. Dude was a leader of this organization since the start and even had a statue of himself in the base. And he does nothing in this final battle. He could have fought someone. I mean, Ken's there and he's not doing anything. He's one of the 3 big faces of this franchise and he doesn't get to take on any one of the Shadaloo generals. Or hell, you know what? Just occurred to me, Guile disappears from the story, as I pointed out earlier. He just gets erased from the story right at the climax. Have Guile fight Balrog. Hell, you could have him fight Balrog, then when he's about to take Balrog out, either Ed steps in to protect Balrog, or Balrog steps in to protect Ed, something that makes Guile realize that Ed and Balrog actually care about each other, and maybe there's more to Balrog than the big corrupt boxer he used to be, and he looks at him and says, "Alright, I'll let you off this time. Go home. Be a family man." I literally thought of that as I was recording this script right now. Yes, it's probably stupid and fan servicey, but it's something. And Ryu did manage to overcome the Satsui no Hado, his character's big conflict for 20 years, but again, it happened off screen, so partial credit at best. I honestly don't think I can think of another game that I have played where so many characters accomplished so little for their stories. But the game then ends with Bison fading away, Rashid gets one final message on his phone from his friend, and he starts to cry before putting on a big strong smile, again kind of implying that this is all just a brave face that he's putting on, but he then races off for his next adventure. Then Colleen tells her boss that Charlie failed, but her boss says that's fine, and guess who it is? If you hadn't figured it out already, it's Gil. Colleen was the lady always standing beside Gil in Street Fighter 3, and Gil says that he's ready to start his mission. I've actually seen people saying they're mad this never got resolved. Guys, it did get resolved. In Street Fighter 3. This story takes place before Street Fighter 3, and the whole point of Street Fighter 5 story was to link Street Fighter 2 and 4 to the events of Street Fighter 3. On second thought, when I lay those numbers out like that, I actually understand why some people were confused about this, never mind. Then at the very end, there's a post-credit scene where Ryu challenges Ken, but this time Ryu wins. And Ken sees Ryu's headband on the ground and says that he doesn't think that Ryu will be needed anymore. Which is a nice reference to the Alpha games, where Ken gave Ryu his red headband as a reminder of their friendship, so Ryu would have something to focus on when he started to feel the Satsui no Hado taking him over. But then Ryu says he still needs it because his journey is never really over. That's actually kind of a nice touch. But against the monumental wall of problems in this story mode, there is nothing they could have done here at the end to save it. Folks, I just spent, I don't know, an hour, let's say an hour. I spent an hour talking about the nightmare of a story mode that was Street Fighter V: A Shadow's Fall. And I have no way to really sum it all up. The horrible character work, the terrible dialogue, the atrocious pacing, the I need a thesaurus of more bad terms that was the graphics, the horrible ending for Charlie and Ryu's entire storyline being resolved off screen, and just the pure laziness of it all. I know some people will say it's unfair to call it lazy because they were being rushed. They had to get it out so fast that they didn't have time to make it any better or include those scenes that they needed to. And yes, you're all right. This team had a rush schedule and cut budget going against it every step of the way, and you cannot blame them for that. But it is still lazy. And if you don't agree, let me ask you one question. If you can answer this, I'll never say it's lazy again, and I will apologize profusely for that. Okay, ready? Here's the question. Rashid has to save his friend from Shadowloo. What's his friend's name? Go on. I brought up his friend a dozen times in this story summary. She's the entire reason anything is happening. She's the one that gave everyone the keys to stop the moons. She's the one who put in there the code that Rashid had to solve. She's the one who has the final message to Rashid at the end of the game. What's her name? It is Never Given. The most important non-playable character in this game doesn't have a name. Or a face for that matter. We see her back running away from Fong at the beginning of the game, but we never get to see her face. But hey, that you can blame on it being rushed. But no name? There is no excuse for that. So, Street Fighter V Story Mode: A Shadow Falls. As you can tell from the past hour of me standing up here like a jackass, not a fan. Maybe like a C, C minus. There were a couple of creative choices that they took, and while I applaud them for pursuing their unique vision, it just didn't quite align with me, and there were just a few, just a couple of awkward bits of dialogue and plot points that didn't really make a lot of sense, and
those ended up comprising roughly about 95% of this entire story. It's the small things like that that really kind of get to me. But what did you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below or something. I am so drained right now. I'm going off script. I can't even finish this outro. This is not a joke. I'm throwing the script out at this point. I had some final jokes to go out on. Screw that noise. I am so done talking about this topic. But you know what I am not done talking about? And that is all the people who helped me out with this video. That's how you know this is unscripted, because normally I would be able to come up with a better segue than that. But yes, we had so many guests on this episode. And while I really wish I had had them on a better episode that was on a subject that we all enjoyed, I will say I have been wanting to do something with each of these guests for a long time now. It was fantastic to get each of them to come on, and every single one of them was a delight to work with. Every single one of them just gave it their all on those line reads, and I appreciate every single one of them for everything that they did. I am sorry that my voice is so shot right now that I can't express my gratitude to each of you for helping me out. Also, we hired an editor for this video to help out with it. That's something that we rarely ever do, but again, I appreciate them for helping out with that as well. I'm going to put in the description down below links to everybody who helped out on this video. I want to see all of you going into those descriptions and clicking on those links, going and following these people. They are all wonderful and they all deserve it. But yes, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you to the guests that we had. Thank you to the editor and everybody else out there. I hope that you guys enjoyed this as much as I'm going to enjoy not having to talk about Street Fighter V anymore. Okay, that's it. I am out. Thank you guys very much for watching the video. Make sure that you follow all my socials, follow all the people in the description down below. You guys know what to do. Thank you all for tuning in. And now, if you'll excuse me, we are now in October. I am going to enjoy spooky season right now. Come back if you want to see any of that. And after October is done with, we will continue and conclude the Street Fighter Retrospective. Bye, everybody.